The sun dipped low over Lagos, scattering gold across the skyline. From the tallest tower in Victoria Island, the glass walls of Ogunlola Medical Plaza reflected the fading light like a jewel. Inside, the evening shift had begun. White coats hurried through corridors. Nurses pushed trolleys. In the grand executive office at the top floor, Dr. Adewale Ogunlola sat alone. He was the kind of man who drew respect the moment he entered a room. Tall, broad-shouldered, his hair just beginning to gray at the edges, his eyes sharp behind rimless glasses. To the world, he was a savior. A billionaire doctor who had built hospitals across Nigeria, a man whose name carried weight in government and whose smile graced magazine covers. Yet at that moment, as he gazed out over the city, the pride that usually swelled in his chest felt like an empty drum. On his desk lay letters of gratitude from patients whose lives he had saved. Awards in crystal and gold lined the shelves, and yet none of them filled the silence of the vast room. His driver had long gone home. His wife was in London, his sons abroad at boarding schools. And he, the great Adewale, sat surrounded by wealth but starved of something he could not name. The memory rose unbidden. A small house in Osun State. Mud walls, a zinc roof, the smell of firewood and wet earth after the rain. His mother's voice, soft but firm, whispering into his ear, "Adewale, remember, no matter how high you rise, never forget those who held you when you had nothing." He closed his eyes, fighting the ache in his chest. That was a long time ago. He had left that boy behind, along with everything and everyone tied to his hunger-stricken past. Or so he thought. The knock on the door came soft but firm. His secretary peeked in, holding an envelope. "Sir," this came by hand delivery. The guard said the girl refused to leave until it was received. Adewale frowned. From who? She didn't say, only that it was important. He waved her off, taking the envelope. It was plain, cheap paper, the kind street vendors use to wrap Accra. The handwriting was shaky, uneven. As he unfolded the sheet, his breath caught. "Father, if truly you are my blood, come to us. Mother is dying. I beg you." The office seemed to tilt. He gripped the edge of the desk, the words burning into his mind. Father, blood, dying, beg. His heart thundered. For years he had buried that part of his life. The years of struggle, the woman he once loved, and the child born of their youth. He had convinced himself the past was dead, but now the past had walked right into his empire of glass and gold, refusing to remain buried. He sank into his chair, the letter trembling in his hand. The room felt colder, emptier. He read it again, slower this time, each word heavier than the last. "Father," he whispered the word aloud, and for the first time in decades, it didn't feel like a title of honor. It felt like a question. The skyline of Lagos glittered outside, but all Adewale saw was the face of a young woman from long ago, smiling at him under the shade of a baobab tree in their village. Her laughter, her faith, her love. Things he left behind his climb toward the top. Now that past had a name. That past had eyes. That past had written him a letter, and it was waiting. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the ground still glistened, holding puddles of yellow streetlight. Adewale drove himself that night, leaving his driver behind. He wanted no company, no questions. His luxury SUV hummed quietly as he turned off the main highway and into the narrower, forgotten streets of the city. Here, the roads were uneven, patched with sand and potholes. Kerosene lamps flickered from small kiosks, and the smell of roasted corn mingled with exhaust fumes. Children with dusty feet ran through puddles, their laughter cutting into the night. It had been years since Adewale had seen these kinds of streets. He felt like a stranger stepping into his own forgotten life. He parked by a crumbling two-story building with cracked paint and rusted zinc roofing. Laundry hung limply from balcony rails, swaying in the night breeze. The compound was alive with the clatter of plates, the cry of a baby, the cough of a tired old man. And then he saw her. She stood at the gate, holding the rusty iron bars as though they were the only thing keeping her upright. The glow from a weak bulb above the gate caught her face, young, but not untouched by hardship. Her hair was braided neatly, though the bands at the tips were mismatched. Her dress was faded but carefully washed. Her eyes, however, were what froze him large, unblinking, full of something raw. "Are you Dr. Adewale?" she asked. Her voice was not loud, but it pierced through the compound noise. He swallowed. For years, strangers had called him doctor with awe, respect, even worship. But on her lips, the title sounded like a question. A test. "Yes," he answered slowly. The girl's grip on the gate tightened. Her lips trembled, but she didn't look away. "My name is Amara." The name lodged in his chest like a stone. His breath caught. From the shadow of a doorway, a woman emerged. Her wrapper was faded, her steps weary, but her eyes sharp. She stopped when she saw him, her hand gripping the frame for support. "Adewale," she whispered. The sound of his name in her voice nearly undid him. It had been more than 17 years since he last heard it spoken that way. He opened his mouth, but nothing came. The woman walked closer, resting a trembling hand on the girl's shoulder. "Do you see her?" Her voice hardened. "This is your blood." The world tilted. The noise of the compound fell away. Adewale stared at Amara. The curve of her chin, the stubborn tilt of her head, the way her eyes cut into him as though demanding answers. Amara stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. "I don't need your money," she said. "I don't need your mansion or your cars. I came for the truth." The words struck harder than any accusation. Adewale, the man who built empires, felt smaller than a boy standing barefoot in the dust. Amara's eyes narrowed. "Tell me why you left. Tell me why you never came back. Were we not worth remembering?" Her mother pulled her back gently, but Amara shrugged off a hand. She took another step forward until she was just a breath away from him. "You heal strangers," she whispered. "You save the lives of people you have never met. But you left us bleeding. You left us to die. Tell me, doctor, are we not your patients too?" Her words clung to the night air, refusing to fade. The compound seemed to hold its breath as Amara's words faded into the night. Neighbors pretended to mind their business, but eyes peeked from cracked windows and shadows leaned closer. Lagos compounds had a way of swallowing secrets whole, but tonight even the walls seemed hungry for this one. "Come inside," Ngozi said quietly, turning away before Adewale could answer. Her shoulders sagged with exhaustion, yet there was an unmistakable steel in her posture. She led the way into the single room that had been her world for years. Adewale followed, his steps heavy, his chest tight. The room was dimly lit by a lantern set on a wooden stool. The smell of disinfectant failed to hide the scent of sickness. A mat lay on the floor in one corner, a thin blanket crumpled on it. Against the wall stood a narrow iron bed where a woman's body rested. It was Ngozi, or rather, what was left of the woman he had once known. Her face was pale, her lips dry, her breathing shallow. Her eyes fluttered open at the sound of footsteps, and for a moment they widened. "Adewale," she whispered. He froze at the sound. Her voice was the same, yet not the same, thinner, weighed down by years of suffering. He took a step closer, but Amara moved quickly, standing protectively between them. "Don't," she said sharply. Their eyes locked again. Father and daughter, strangers bound by blood. She didn't flinch, didn't step aside, even as her mother struggled to lift a trembling hand. "Amara," Ngozi breathed, let him come." Reluctantly, Amara stepped back, her glare never leaving Adewale's face. He sank to his knees beside the bed. The once proud man felt suddenly small, stripped of every layer of wealth and status. He reached for Ngozi's hand, shocked by how light it felt, how frail. "I should have come sooner," he said, his voice breaking. Ngozi smiled faintly, a smile that carried both forgiveness and pain. "Time has its own way of teaching us, Adewale." Amara crossed her arms tightly, her voice bitter. "Forgiveness is easy for those who suffered less. You left us with nothing. You left her to carry everything alone." Tears burned Adewale's eyes, but he did not look away. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid of being dragged back into the poverty I escaped. I thought if I looked back, I would lose everything I fought for. But in gaining the world, I lost you." Amara shook her head. "You didn't just lose us. You abandoned us." Silence filled the room, heavy as smoke. Outside, the sound of the compound continued. A baby crying, a man arguing with his wife, a radio playing faint high-life music. But inside, the three of them existed in their own fragile bubble, a family torn apart by choices. Ngozi coughed weakly, her body shaking. Amara rushed to support her, dabbing her lips with a cloth. Adewale watched, guilt flooding him. All the hospitals he had built, all the lives he had saved, and here lay the woman who once loved him, without even the dignity of proper care. "I will take you from here," he said suddenly. "Both of you. Tonight." Amara looked up sharply. "And then what? You think money fixes everything? You think one night in your mansion erases 17 years of silence?" Her words stung, but Adewale did not argue. He simply met her gaze, his own steady with determination. "No, but it is where I must begin." For a long moment, Amara studied him. She saw the lines of regret etched into his face, the trembling in his hands. She wanted to hate him, but somewhere deep inside, a flicker of longing betrayed her. Ngozi's fingers tightened weakly around Adewale's hand. "Take her," she whispered. "Even if you cannot heal me, do not let her suffer the way I did." Adewale's throat closed. He bowed his head, his tears falling onto the thin blanket. "I will. I swear it." Amara turned away, blinking furiously, her chest heaving with emotion she refused to show. The truth had been uncovered, and it was heavier than she imagined. Her plea had brought him here, but it had also exposed a wound that would not close easily. As the lantern flickered low, shadows lengthened across the room, and in that house of silence, a new chapter of their lives began. Not of healing, not yet, but of reckoning. Morning light spilled into the compound through broken zinc roofing, painting everything in muted gold. The cries of roosters and the clatter of buckets at the communal tap mixed with the hum of the city waking up. In the small room, Adewale sat awake, his elbows on his knees, his eyes red from a night without sleep. Ngozi had drifted back into shallow rest, her breath uneven, her face pale. Amara sat near her, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes fixed on Adewale as though she feared if she blinked he would vanish like a dream. The room was too small for the weight it now carried. 17 years of silence pressed against its thin walls. Adewale finally rose. "Pack a few things," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. "We leave this morning." Amara's brows furrowed. "Leave to where?" "To where you will never go hungry again, where your mother will have care, to where you belong." Her jaw tightened. "You don't decide where I belong." Their eyes clashed, hers sharp with defiance, his heavy with guilt. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ngozi stirred and whispered weakly, "Go with him. Amara, he has come. Whatever tomorrow holds, let today carry us forward." Reluctantly, Amara stood, gathering their few possessions, a small bag with folded wrappers, an old Bible with torn pages, and the wristwatch her mother had once said belonged to Adewale himself. When they stepped out, the entire compound seemed to freeze. Neighbors paused mid-sweep. Women fetching water whispered behind their palms. Children tugged at their mothers' wrappers, asking questions. The sight of the billionaire doctor standing in their shabby courtyard was too strange, too out of place. "Nah, and be dat," one man muttered. "The doctor way get all those big hospital?" Another whispered. "And not true same get Pekin for here?" Eyes followed them as Adewale led Ngozi, frail and leaning on his arm, toward the waiting car. Amara walked beside them, her chin lifted proudly, though her stomach churned with unease. By the time the SUV pulled out of the compound, the story had already begun to spread. In Victoria Island, where wealth built walls of glass and steel, the news landed like fire on dry grass. Society ladies whispered over brunch, their voices thick with disbelief. "Have you heard? Dr. Adewale has a daughter in the slums." A scandal! After all these years of holding himself like royalty, his colleagues at the hospital board exchanged guarded glances. Some pitied him, others smirked, but all agreed reputation was fragile and the revelation of a hidden family could topple even the mightiest image. At his mansion, the silence was different, sharp, accusing. His wife, Yewanda, had returned early from London, her face cold as marble when he walked into the lounge with Amara and Ngozi behind him. "What is this?" she asked, her voice calm but cutting. Adewale opened his mouth, but no words formed. Amara stepped forward, her young shoulders squared. "I am his daughter," she said. "And she," she gestured toward her mother, who leaned weakly against the sofa, "is the woman he left behind." Yewanda's lips parted, but no sound came. For years, she had stood proudly beside him at charity galas, believing herself the sole queen of his empire. Now the foundation cracked. Her eyes hardened. "You will explain, Adewale." Ngozi coughed softly, her body trembling. The sound cut through the tension like a blade. Without a word, Amara guided her mother toward the nearest chair, ignoring Yewanda's glare. The house that once echoed with pride now rang with whispers of betrayal. Days stretched into weeks. Doctors attended Ngozi in Adewale's private hospital, but her illness ran deep, years of neglect carved into her frail frame. Amara refused to leave her side, even as Adewale tried to draw nearer. At night, the mansion was restless. Yewanda moved like a shadow, her silence louder than screams. The servants gossiped in corners, wondering how long before the empire itself fractured. One evening, the storm finally broke. "You humiliated me," Yewanda hissed, standing in the grand dining room, her voice trembling with rage. "You brought them here, a dying woman, a girl who spits in your face. And you expect me to accept it? What of our sons? What of the name we built?" Adewale stood at the other end of the table, weary but unyielding. "It was not your name I built. It was mine, and mine is stained with what I left behind." Her eyes flashed. "Then carry your stain alone." She swept from the room, her heels striking like gavel blows against marble. But outside the mansion, the world spun with its own rhythm. The story of the billionaire doctor and his hidden daughter spread beyond Lagos, into towns and villages. Some curse him for his pride, others praise him for at last acknowledging blood. In his hometown, elders gathered under the baobab tree, shaking their heads. "A man who forgets his roots is like a river that forgets its source," one said. "But if he remembers before it is too late," another replied, "perhaps the river can still flow true." Amara, hearing these words from whispers in the village, felt torn. She hated him for abandoning them. Yet she could not deny the flicker of hope, the possibility that something new could grow from the ashes. But hope was fragile, and the weight of secrets was heavy, for in the shadows, forces stirred. People who would not let Adewale's truth be a private matter. Journalists hunted the story, rivals sharpened their knives, and even family members who had long envied his empire waited, ready to strike. And as the storm gathered, Amara realized her plea had uncovered more than just her father's guilt. It had opened a wound in an empire built on silence, a wound that would not heal quietly. The mansion had grown quiet, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of walls holding secrets, of people avoiding one another in corridors, of a house waiting for something to break. Adewale walked the grand halls at night like a man haunted. Every portrait of himself on the walls seemed to accuse him. Every award gleaming on the shelves mocked him. For all his greatness, he had been powerless where it mattered most. Ngozi's health declined with each passing day. Doctors did their best. Nurses moved quietly in and out of her room, but years of hardship had taken their toll. Amara barely left her mother's side. She sat by the bed, reading aloud from the torn Bible, spoon-feeding her when she was strong enough, wiping her brow when the fever came. One evening, as rain lashed against the tall windows, Adewale entered the room. Ngozi's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, the years peeled away. She saw not the billionaire doctor, not the man the world admired, but the young student she once loved, the boy who had promised her forever. "You came back," she whispered. "I should never have left," Adewale replied, his voice breaking. Her thin fingers reached for his. "Regret is heavy, Adewale. Don't let it bury you. Carry her instead. Carry Amara. She is stronger than you know, but even the strong need arms to rest in." Amara wiped at her eyes angrily. "Don't talk like that, Mama. You'll get better." Ngozi smiled faintly, the kind of smile that belongs to those who see farther than the living. "Better has many meanings, my child." She coughed, her body trembling. Adewale helped steady her, but he felt her strength slipping like water through his fingers. That night, as thunder rolled across the sky, Ngozi slipped into eternal rest. Her final breath was soft, almost a sigh, her lips curved in peace. Amara clutched her hand long after it had gone cold. Her sobs filled the room, echoing through the mansion's marble halls. Adewale sat beside her, silent, broken, the weight of his choices pressing heavier than ever. The burial was quiet, held in her hometown. Few came. Some neighbors, a handful of church members, and those who once whispered about her struggles. Adewale stood apart, head bowed, as the red earth covered her coffin. Amara's tears fell silently, but her eyes were fierce. She had lost her mother, but she had also inherited her strength. After the final prayers, an old woman from the village approached Adewale. Her face was wrinkled, her voice low but steady. "Doctor," she said, "the dead carry their peace, but the living carry the consequences. Do not let your daughter grow with the same wound that killed her mother." Her words clung to him long after the grave had been filled. Back in Lagos, the world was less forgiving. The media spun the story into headlines. Billionaire doctor's hidden family exposed. Who was Amara? The daughter no one knew. Philanthropist or pretender? Rivals on the hospital board questioned his leadership. Investors whispered about scandals. Even Yawanda, his wife, grew colder with each day, her silence a punishment sharper than words. One night, she confronted him. "You've ruined everything," she said, her eyes glittering with restrained fury. "The empire we built, the name our sons must carry, all of it stained because of your weakness." Adewale did not argue. He only answered softly, "If the truth stains, then perhaps the name was never clean." Her hand trembled as though she might strike him, but instead she turned away. From that night, she moved into another wing of the mansion, leaving him to his ghosts. Through it all, Amara remained. She moved through the house with quiet dignity, refusing to be swallowed by its grandeur. She carried her mother's memory like armor, her eyes sharp, her will unbending. One evening, she confronted him. "You can build hospitals across the world, but what will you build here?" She asked, gesturing between them. "Will you build a father, or will you build another empire of silence?" Adewale felt her words like fire. He had lost his chance with Ngozi. He would not lose this one. "I will build whatever it takes to earn your trust," he said. It was not easy. Trust is not bought with money, nor rebuilt overnight. But he began with small steps. He sat with her at dinner, even when she refused to eat. He listened when she spoke of her mother's struggles. He drove her himself to school when she agreed to return, ignoring the stares of others. Slowly, walls began to crack. One morning, Amara stood before the family portrait in the grand hallway, the painting of Adewale, Yawanda, and their 2 sons. Her gaze lingered on it for a long time before she turned to him. "Where do I fit?" she asked quietly. Adewale's throat tightened. "Here," he said, placing his hand over his heart. "If the walls will not take you, my heart will." For the first time, her eyes softened. Months passed. The scandal that once roared in newspapers faded into whispers. The board regained confidence as Adewale proved his hospital stronger than gossip. Society found new scandals to chase. But inside the mansion, the change was deeper, slower. Yawanda never fully forgave, but she learned to coexist. The sons, once distant, slowly warmed to their half-sister, drawn by her sharp wit and quiet strength. And Adewale himself changed most of all. The pride that once blinded him melted into humility. He still wore his suits, still healed the sick, still signed deals, but at night he walked the garden with Amara, listening more than he spoke. One evening, under the shade of the baobab tree he had planted in the garden as a memory of his village, Adewale told her, "Wealth without wisdom is a curse. I built hospitals to heal the world, but you reminded me that healing begins at home." Amara looked at him, her eyes glistening but steady. Then don't forget again. I will not, he promised. The wind rustled the leaves above them, carrying away the last shadows of silence. And those scars remained in their family, in their hearts. A new story had begun. A story not of riches or scandals, but of redemption. Because in the end, the plea of a daughter had done what billions could not. It had uncovered the truth, and in that truth lay the path to healing. A river that forgets its source will run dry. A man who forgets his roots will lose himself. But he who remembers, even at the edge of shame, may yet find life flowing again.